Both state and federal governments have condemned an anti-Semitic rant by two New South Wales nurses who have been stood down and are under investigation for declaring they would refuse to treat or even kill Israeli patients. It comes as both Labor and Coalition MPs attempt to clamp down on anti-Semitic acts, even calling out some university vice-chancellors for failing to punish brazen misconduct and warning that a toxic environment on campuses is stoking anti-Semitism. For their take, let's bring in journalist Joe Hildebrand and Seven's national business editor Amelia Brace. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
What do we say about this? Let's talk about the I know. I mean, there's not much you can say about these nurses. Also, universities are being called out this morning for sort of being a hotbed of hate. What do you think of that, Joe?
I think what's happening is that there's been a kind of normalisation of anti-Semitism that has started with intense kind of anti-Israeli sentiment and almost sort of morphed. And I think that's the really interesting thing. I think the thing with the nurses who, in a way, I mean, their careers are obviously completely over now, and to some extent their lives have been destroyed. But it is clear, even from what they've said themselves, that they just sort of thought they were expressing something either A, that you could just sort of joke about, hey, I just said I was going to kill the Israelis, I was just joking, as if that's kind of like a normal thing that you would joke about. And also that clearly whatever they were saying, they must have thought was normal enough for them to be able to do it in their workplace, in their scrubs, talking to some stranger online who was obviously familiar with this stuff. And I just think there's a lesson in the insidiousness of that kind of attitude, and it is an insidiousness of ideology that creeps in. Everyone tells you that this is okay to say, that this is what you should think. Then you just start to say it, and then you sort of pull back and you expose it for what it is. And it's horrible, but it is genuinely being, I think, being normalised, and it is exploding into the sort of sentiment we see on our university campuses where you have anti-Semitism disguised as activism.
Yeah, I think you're right. Amelia, I know business leaders who've had to pull up employees and say you cannot share that because that is hate, and had to explain it. But they're so involved in their own argument, they're blinded by that.
Yeah, exactly. And people do have to be careful, we always say, in the current environment, but we should be careful and more mindful in every environment about what we're saying. It might be something that you think is funny amongst your friends, but when you're not, I guess, pulling yourself out of your immediate group, you might not realise the impact that that could have on others. And when we're talking about universities, it's a really dangerous slippery slope, I think, because universities have always been the home to free speech, free thought, debate and protest, and I think it's very dangerous to stifle that. At the end of the day, these are adults, they're not school students, they're university students. They are entitled to their own thoughts and to speak them. If it's hate speech, if it's illegal, you call the police.
Yep.
Let's move on. The Albanese government will step in and buy Rex Airlines if a buyer for the embattled regional carrier can't be found. The coalition opposes the plan, but it may become reality given Rex has yet to receive a serious offer. Amelia, let's go to you on this. Some other regional airlines are saying, no, what about us? And also, if a buyer can't be found, is it a reasonable way to spend taxpayers' funds, I guess?
I think it depends where in Australia you are. If you're in regional Australia, you would say absolutely. And it's interesting that the coalition isn't on board. The Nationals, you would think, would have many constituents who really want...
What kind of agrarian socialism don't they understand?
They'd have plenty of constituents who really want Rex operating. Obviously, this is a last-ditch effort. If they do need to save the carrier, it would only be for the regional routes. They would no longer be trying to operate in the Golden Triangle, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, which is basically where they stuffed up, trying to compete with Qantas and Virgin there. Maybe it's a stopgap measure to keep it operating for a few more years and until we can get a more competitive regional carrier.
So was it a bit of a failed business plan, and this will be changed if it's taken over by the government?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, generally speaking, you don't want the government to get involved in any area where the private sector could do it more efficiently and better and without taxpayer funds. But I think we're in an era where the conventional notions of big government versus small government or no government or, you know, capitalism and socialism or whatever you want to call it have kind of dissolved. Like, you've got a situation in America where the right is now the party of protectionism and tariffs, and the left has become the party of globalisation and neoliberalism. It's like, how did that happen? That's not right. That's meant to be the other way around. So I think we're in a situation where it's a purely, shamelessly practical-driven approach where you say, right, whatever works, works. Clearly, people in country Australia need to be able to get around. Farmers need to be able to come into the city to do business from time to time. There is not necessarily always going to be a commercial, profit-making imperative in that happening, but it is vital for the overall economy, not least of all people's lives and livelihoods. So I think, yes, whatever it takes to keep rural people connected to the rest of us has to be done.
And somehow bring down those airfares. Airfares in regional Australia
OMG,
are
I know,
absolutely ridiculous.
You can get to Bali
So
for less than...
You can.
get to Dubbo, yeah, it's
Yeah,
crazy.
that's how we grew up in regional Australia, knowing that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Let's work on that. Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Here's
Nat.
Chevo.